Let's take a look at a few of the key metrics in GA4. First up, let's compare what we see in GA4 to what we saw in Universal Analytics. When you were looking at Universal Analytics and you were looking at the user metric, the number you were actually looking at is total users. In GA4, you're going to look for total users. New users are the same between the two versions, as are sessions. Number of sessions per user has become sessions per user, and page views has become views because our views can come from both web pages and app screens. There is not an equivalent of the pages per session metric from Universal Analytics, but it is easy to calculate as views divided by sessions. Average session duration is now average engagement time per session, and engagement time is a new metric that we'll talk about in just a little bit. Bounce rate is the same between the two versions, but a bounce is also different in GA4 compared to UA, so we'll talk about that. A user is reporting identity dependent, meaning that if we're using device-based reporting identity or observed reporting identity or blended reporting identity, that determines how this count will show up in our reports. It is roughly equivalent to the users that we saw in Universal Analytics. A session is a collection of events performed by the same user and measured during a contiguous segment of time. So what that means is that we don't necessarily know exactly when a user abandons their session, when they're done on our website or app. So sessions have what's called a session timeout, which is an amount of time that after which we consider the session ended. By default, this is 30 minutes, but it is configurable by admin. So let's look at how Universal Analytics managed sessions or defined them. The basic definition is a session starts on the user's first hit and continues until 30 minutes after the last recorded interactive hit. So the last time they clicked on something or looked at a web page, if 30 minutes or more goes by, then the session is considered ended. In this example, we have at least 5 hits that occur in a single session. We have hit 1 all the way through the nth hit, but after that nth hit, which we would consider the last hit, 30 minutes or more goes by, so we consider the session over. There are 2 scenarios in Universal Analytics that we need to consider in addition to this basic session scenario. The first of those is the day boundary scenario. The day boundary is midnight in the property time zone. So for instance, if your business is in New York and the admin has configured the property time zone for Eastern, then if a user is on the site at 8:50 p.m. Pacific from California, they're actually getting close to that day boundary. So if their session continues past midnight Eastern, Universal Analytics would see that and break that original active session into 2. In the example that we have in the schematic here, we have 3 hits that happened before the day boundary, and those become session 1. And then we have 2 hits past midnight, and those become session 2. The other scenario we need to consider is new attribution data in the middle of an active session. So in this scenario, the user is on your website, they're looking at things, and maybe that sparks a question in their mind and they type a quick search into their browser. And that takes them to a Google search results page. They're scrolling those results and they see something that they think is what they want. They click on it and it leads them straight back to your site. Now we haven't exceeded that 30-minute timeout yet, so that original session is still active. But when Universal Analytics sees that new attribution data, it says, okay, we are going to end the original session and start a new session with the new attribution data. In GA4, all of those scenarios result in one session. So a session with no interruption, either day boundary interruption or attribution data interruption, is one session. In the day boundary scenario, that is still one session, but the session will end up being counted on both days. So the day before midnight and the day after midnight. And in the scenario with new attribution data, the new attribution data is collected and it is stored with the hit where it occurred or the event where it occurred, but we no longer break that session into two. Now, what that means is if you're comparing your Universal Analytics session counts to GA4, all things being equal, GA4 will show you less sessions for the same time period. Please note that deltas of plus or minus 20% when comparing your sessions between Universal Analytics and GA4 are reasonable. A page view, this is a page view event or a page view hit, and between Universal Analytics and GA4, they are basically the same. So let's look at some scenarios based on what we know so far and try to determine a couple of things. Let's see how many sessions each of these people have, and let's see what kind of events they have. Let's start with Pam. Pam starts her session at 9 a.m. on our homepage. Then something happens and she doesn't come back until 9:27 and looks at a product page. And then she's interrupted again, and at 9:56 a.m., she goes back to the homepage. And then she looks at a search results page at 10:20. And finally, at 10:47 a.m., she looks at another product page. Now, if we ask the question of how many sessions does Pam have, the answer is 1, because even though there are large gaps of time between her events, between her activity, none of them exceed 30 minutes. So from that home page view to the product page view, that's 27 minutes. From the product page view to the back to home page, that's 29 minutes. From the home page to the search results page, that's 24 minutes. And then it's 27 minutes from those search results to another product page. We never exceed that 30-minute time out. So all of this activity spread out over an hour and 47 minutes is a single session. Next up, let's ask the question of how many views does Pam have in her session? And the answer to that is pretty simple, because each of the events that we see listed here is a view. She looked at the home page. She looked at the product detail page. She went back to look at the home page. She looked at a search results page. And then she looked at another product page. Now, what's not shown here is the event that led her to the search results page. We can assume that there was a search event, but it's not tracked, or at least not in this journey. So we can't say definitively that there was a site search event. Now let's talk about Jim. Jim starts his session at 9:03 looking at a product page. But then nothing happens until 9:45 when he plays a video. And then 15 minutes after that, he looks at a support page. Now, let's start with how many sessions does Jim have? Jim has 2 sessions. He has the first session at 9:03 a.m. when he looked at that product detail page. But nothing happens for 42 minutes, so that session is ended after 30 minutes. He starts a new session at 9:45 when he plays that product video. And in addition to the video, he looks at a support page, and that support page view is part of that second session. Now, if we ask the question of how many view events does Jim have, the answer is 2. We have that initial product page view in his first session, and then we have that support page view in the second session. All we know about what happened at 9:45 is that he pressed play on a video. So we don't know if that was on a new page. There's no view event that tells us that. And in fact, we can assume here that the video was embedded in that original product page, and he simply started a new session by clicking play at 9:45 a.m. Dwight is similar. He has a single page view at 9:07, and then nothing happens for over an hour when he goes to look at a support page. He looks at a product manual, and then he submits a ticket. So if we ask the question of how many page views does Dwight have, he's got 1 in that first session at 9:07. And then if we look at the second session, we can say definitively that he has one view there when he looks at the support page, but the other two events are not necessarily view events. He looks at a product manual. That could be an embedded PDF in the support page. He submits a support ticket. That could be an inline form in the support page that doesn't lead to a new page. So for all we know, all of that activity, those three events, took place in the same location on the support page where he had that first view of his second session. Okay, now we're going to need to talk about some new metrics in GA4. The first one we're going to talk about is an engaged session. So Google is attempting to be better or more nuanced about how they measure user engagement with your website or app. So an engaged session is one where any of these three conditions is true. The session lasted for at least 10 seconds, or it had at least one key event, or it had 2 or more views. If any of those three conditions are met, the session is considered engaged. If none of those conditions are met, the session is considered non-engaged, otherwise known as a bounce. So this is the distinction between bounces in GA4 and Universal Analytics. In Universal Analytics, a bounce was simply a session with only one interactive hit. That was the only condition that needed to be satisfied. We have slightly more nuance around what we consider engaged to be and not engaged. So all three of these conditions have to fail for the session to be considered not engaged, otherwise known as a bounce. And then bounce rate, the actual calculation, is going to be calculated the same. It's those bounces, otherwise known as non-engaged sessions, divided by total sessions. And that's how we arrive at the bounce rate. Along those lines, we have an engagement time metric that we will see as average engagement time per session or average engagement time per user, and a few other different ways that it's looked at. This is the average length of time the user was engaged during their session. So what is engagement time? Engagement is only measured when the browser has focus for at least 1 second, or when the app is in the foreground for at least 1 second. So if I were to minimize my browser where you see this presentation, Google would stop counting engagement time because I defocused the browser window. If I was in an app and then I swiped it off of the screen and I'm looking at the home screen of my phone, Google is going to stop counting engagement time. If I bring that app back up, I have to have it open and in the foreground for at least 1 second for engagement time to kick back in. I hope that helps you understand just a few of the key metrics in GA4 and how they might differ from Universal Analytics, especially when they are shared between the two, like session.